The Body in the Bluebell Wood, a Miss Marple Mystery. Hi there. Welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's mystery begins with a peaceful walk through Bluebell Wood, where a shocking discovery disturbs the quiet beauty of the forest. While others see only tragedy, Miss Marple notices the first clues to a carefully hidden crime. Before we uncover the truth behind the body in Bluebell Wood, don't forget to subscribe for more haunting Miss Marple mysteries on Haunting Vales. Chapter 1. The Body in the Bluebell Wood. The village of Stourfield woke beneath a pale spring sky. A soft mist clung to the hedgerows. Blackbirds sang from the old oak trees. It looked like the sort of morning that promised nothing more troubling than burnt toast or late post. The cottages stood neat and quiet. Their gardens overflowed with bluebells and primroses. Even the church clock seemed in no hurry. If anyone had been asked whether murder could visit such a peaceful place, they would have laughed. Villages had a way of hiding unpleasant things behind polished front doors. Mrs. Eliza Trent set off just after 8 with a wicker basket over one arm. Every spring she gathered bluebells from the edge of the old wood for the church display. She'd followed the same narrow path for nearly 30 years. She knew every crooked tree and every moss-covered stone. That morning felt no different. The air smelled of damp earth. Tiny drops of dew clung to the flowers like glass. Somewhere deeper in the trees, a wood pigeon called, slow, steady, familiar. She noticed the walking stick first. It lay across the path as though someone had dropped it in a hurry. Dark oak, silver handle. She frowned. It wasn't the sort of thing anyone from the village would leave behind. Old Mr. Carter carried ash wood. The vicar's stick had a carved duck's head. This one belonged to somebody else, somebody with expensive tastes. Mrs. Trent bent down to lift it. Then she saw the broken patch of bluebells beyond the path. At first, she thought a deer had wandered through the flowers. The stems had been crushed flat. Mud showed where soft ground had been disturbed. But deer didn't leave polished black shoes. Her eyes traveled slowly across the clearing. A man lay on his back among the bluebells. His coat was neat. His tie sat perfectly straight. One hand rested across his chest as though he'd settled down for an afternoon nap. The other was buried beneath the flowers. His face had turned towards the pale sky. His eyes were open, empty, still. Mrs. Trent didn't scream. She simply stood there, frozen. The basket slipped from her hand. Bluebells scattered across the ground around the stranger's polished shoes. For several long seconds she couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. The whole wood seemed to fall silent. Even the birds stopped singing. Then she turned and hurried back along the path as quickly as her old legs would carry her. Branches caught at her sleeves. Her breathing grew sharp. She nearly stumbled twice before reaching the lane. By the time she reached the village shop, her face had lost every trace of color. "I've found a gentleman," she whispered. The shopkeeper looked puzzled. "Where?" "In Bluebell Wood." "And?" Mrs. Trent swallowed hard. "He's dead." Within half an hour, the peaceful village had become something else entirely. Curious faces gathered behind garden gates. Curtains twitched along the high street. Farmers abandoned their fields. Children were called indoors without explanation. The news traveled faster than the church bells ever could. A dead stranger had been found among the spring flowers. Nobody knew his name. Nobody admitted to recognizing him. Inspector Harold Finch arrived from the county police before midday. He was tall, tidy, and carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed every mystery could be solved by asking the same questions loudly enough. He studied the clearing with narrowed eyes while two constables marked the ground around the body. "No signs of robbery," he muttered. "Wallet untouched, watch still there." One constable pointed towards the walking stick. Perhaps he fell. Inspector Finch shook his head. Healthy men don't simply fall over and die in the middle of a wood. The village doctor knelt beside the body for several quiet moments before standing again. "He didn't die here," the doctor said softly. "I'd stake my reputation on that. Very little blood. Whoever did this brought him here afterwards." Inspector Finch frowned. He didn't much enjoy having his first idea dismissed. "So we're looking for someone with enough strength to move a grown man. Seems that way." The inspector glanced across the clearing once more. His eyes searched the broken flowers, the muddy ground, the scattered branches. He nodded to himself as though everything already made sense. Not far away, standing beyond the police cordon with her knitting bag resting lightly against her arm, Miss Marple watched without saying a word. Most people barely noticed her. Inspector Finch certainly didn't. He was far too busy looking at the body. Miss Marple, meanwhile, was looking at the bluebells. There was a difference, and before the day was over, that difference would begin to matter.
Chapter 2. The Bluebells Kept Their Secret. By the following morning, Stourfield had changed in quiet, unsettling ways. Doors opened only a crack, conversations stopped whenever footsteps approached. Even the village dogs seemed strangely subdued. People smiled out of habit, but the smiles faded almost at once. A dead stranger had a way of making every familiar face appear slightly unfamiliar. The police soon learned the man's name. He was Arthur Pembroke, a retired solicitor from a nearby market town. Respectable, well-spoken, a widower. According to those who knew him, he lived alone and rarely wandered into the countryside. Bluebell Wood was miles from his usual routine. No one could explain why he had traveled there. Stranger still, his pocket watch had stopped at exactly 9:20, yet the village doctor believed he had died several hours earlier. Inspector Finch gathered the villagers inside the church hall. He questioned them one by one. Where had they been the previous evening? Who had seen the stranger? Had anyone heard an argument? Most answers sounded ordinary enough. Someone had been feeding hens, another had been repairing a gate. The vicar claimed he had spent the evening preparing Sunday's sermon. Everything seemed perfectly proper. Almost. Miss Marple sat quietly near the back of the hall with her knitting resting in her lap. She listened more than she looked. People often revealed far more by the things they left unsaid. The inspector, of course, missed that completely. He preferred direct questions. Villagers preferred indirect answers. One reply caught Miss Marple's attention. Mrs. Evelyn Harper, who lived beside the village green, mentioned hearing a motor car just after dusk. That alone wasn't unusual. The road passed close to her cottage. But then she added something rather curious. "It stopped for a minute," she said. "No engine after that, just silence." The inspector shrugged. "Probably someone checking a map." "I don't believe so." "Why not?" Mrs. Harper hesitated. "Because no car drove away." The hall fell quiet. Miss Marple lowered her knitting. That was interesting. Later that afternoon, she returned to Bluebell Wood alone. The police had finished their work. The clearing stood empty beneath the trees. Bluebells swayed gently in the breeze as though nothing dreadful had happened there. Nature had already begun hiding the disturbance. She walked slowly, never hurried. Her eyes wandered across the ground instead of straight ahead. Near the edge of the clearing, she stopped. Most of the bluebells had sprung upright again after being crushed.
all except one narrow strip leading towards an old cart track. The flowers there still leaned in the same direction, flattened, bent, not by footsteps, by wheels, very small wheels. Miss Marple crouched carefully and brushed aside a few leaves. Faint marks remained in the soft earth. They were barely visible now, almost gone. Someone had pushed a handcart through the wood, not recently enough to leave fresh tracks, but recently enough to leave damaged flowers. So, she murmured, he wasn't carried after all. A familiar voice came from behind her. I thought I might find you here. It was Dr. Collins. He smiled politely, though his eyes carried more worry than warmth. You've spotted something. I believe I have. The inspector thinks the killer carried the body. Miss Marple gave a small shake of her head. I've never found that people enjoy carrying heavy things if they can avoid it. The doctor looked down at the bent bluebells. His expression changed. A cart? Yes, but whose? Miss Marple looked towards the old cart track disappearing between the trees. That, she said, is exactly the right question. Far away, hidden behind a line of ancient oaks, someone was watching the clearing. They stood perfectly still. Then, without making the slightest sound, they turned and disappeared into the deepening shade.
Chapter 3. The Truth Beneath the Bluebells. The old cart track led to Hawthorne Farm. It had not been used much in recent years. Grass had begun to grow between the worn ruts. Even so, Miss Marple followed it without hesitation. Inspector Finch came along, though he made it quite clear he expected nothing of value to be found. "I still think we're chasing shadows," he said. Miss Marple smiled gently. "Shadows usually belong to someone, Inspector." At the farm stood an aging wooden shed. Inside were broken tools, empty seed sacks, and a small handcart with one damaged wheel. Dried bluebell petals clung to its underside. There was also a smear of dried mud that matched the soil from Bluebell Wood. Inspector Finch's confidence faded. "Well," he muttered, "that shouldn't be here." The farm belonged to Mr. Leonard Briggs, a quiet man who had lived alone since his brother passed away. He greeted them calmly enough, but his hands betrayed him. They wouldn't stay still. His eyes drifted again and again towards the handcart. "I've done nothing wrong," he insisted. "No one has accused you," Miss Marple replied softly. "Then why are you here?" She looked around the shed before answering. "Because people often hide the truth in places they've stopped noticing." Mr. Briggs said nothing. Miss Marple stepped towards an old shelf where a pair of muddy boots rested. One sole carried tiny bluebell petals pressed deep into the tread. "You moved the body," she said quietly. The farmer closed his eyes. For several long moments, only the wind could be heard outside. Then he nodded. "Yes." Inspector Finch stepped forward at once. "So you admit it?" "I moved him. I didn't kill him." His voice cracked, not with fear, with exhaustion. Mr. Briggs explained that he had gone into the wood the previous evening after hearing an argument. By the time he arrived, Arthur Pembroke was already lying on the ground. Another man was standing over him. Hidden by the trees, Mr. Briggs couldn't see the man's face clearly, only his dark coat and flat cap. The stranger fled as soon as he heard movement. "I panicked," he admitted. "Years ago I was questioned over a theft I didn't commit. The village never quite forgot it. I knew what would happen if they found me standing beside another dead man." "So you moved him," said the inspector. "I thought if he was discovered elsewhere, perhaps I'd be left out of it. It was a foolish thing to do. I know that now."
Miss Marple looked towards the open doorway. The afternoon light spilled across the floorboards. "You weren't protecting yourself, not entirely." Mr. Briggs lowered his head. "My granddaughter was with me. She'd wandered into the wood looking for wild flowers. I couldn't bear the thought of the police frightening her. She's only 8. The inspector's expression softened, if only for a moment. "But that still leaves one question," he said. "Who killed Arthur Pembroke?" Miss Marple folded her hands. "The man who stood to gain the most." She explained that Arthur Pembroke had recently discovered someone had been quietly altering old property records. Several cottages, including land beside Hawthorne Farm, were about to be sold through dishonest paperwork. Only one person had access to every document: the village solicitor. When confronted with the evidence, the solicitor tried to deny everything. Then Miss Marple mentioned one small detail. Fresh scratches on his motor car matched the narrow branches along the hidden track into Bluebell Wood. He had driven there the night Arthur Pembroke uncovered the fraud. The argument turned violent. One blow was enough. Panic did the rest. His silence ended there. By sunset, Inspector Finch was escorting the solicitor towards the waiting police car. This time he said very little. There wasn't much left to say. Miss Marple remained beside the edge of Bluebell Wood as the evening breeze stirred the sea of blue flowers. From a distance, the clearing looked peaceful once more. It always amazed her how quickly nature covered the marks left by people. The flowers returned, the birds sang again, yet the truth, however deeply buried, had a habit of finding daylight. If you've enjoyed spending time with Miss Marple in Stourfield, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next mystery. There will be another quiet village, another impossible puzzle, and somewhere hidden in plain sight, another truth waiting for Miss Marple to notice. The bluebells swayed gently in the fading light, as though they had known the answer from the very beginning.